Hi, Peter Charles of Hooked Fly Fishing, and today we're going to do an Atlantic salmon pattern called the Golden Garry Dog, and there's no reason why it won't work for a bunch of other species. It's very similar to a Mickey fin tied in the round, so it's going to perform basically the same way. Same colors, except it involves gold instead of silver. So let's get going and look at the material. On the vise here I've got a 3/32 inch aluminum tube. It's 1.5 inches long. You could use a variety of tubes for this one and a variety of lengths. It really doesn't matter that much. Our thread is the usual black Aviva 6/0. The rib is going to be a medium silver, and we're going to use the gold side of this mylar. The wing is made up of red and yellow bucktail with red crystal flash. So let's get tying. Okay, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start my thread a little further back than I usually do. Okay, I'm going to leave the front of this tube bare, and I'm going to explain why. I normally bring my materials further forward, and I tie the wing over those materials. It makes the front end of the fly bulkier, which I don't see as a problem because it helps move water and fluff things around. But my primary reason for doing that when using bucktail or other hair is that if I tie on a bare tube at the front, there's a risk it's going to flare up. So as I bring my material forward to where the thread is here, it creates a ledge, and then the wing goes up on that ledge, and now you've got this big splayed mess. And then you've got to wrap further back in order to bring that under control. So you end up with the big head anyway. So I am going to do it this way, and we'll just play with the results and see what it looks like. But this can often be a good way to make it easier to tie the materials on the head, because when you're tying over ribs and over the mylar and over other body materials, you can run into some complications, especially on tubes, with the thread skidding off the edge as you're trying to finish it off. So let's get going with the rib first. And as usual, I'm going to tie it in the top. Just a couple of turns there to hold it. Now for the mylar, and as I said before, be generous. You go through a lot of this when you tie on a tube. Okay, hold everything together. Work this back. Okay, let's wind this on and pull tight, because we want that mylar to bite into those broad wraps of thread to create those little glittering facets. Create a gap, back up, come forward again. Okay, don't go any further than there. Bind it down to make sure it doesn't move. You notice when I'm using my rotary vise, I put 2 half hitches, not 1. With hooks, you can get away with 1. With tube flies, you're going to risk having your thread come undone if you only use 1 half hitch. Now for our rib, we're going to do the same thing when stop and put an extra turn. There we go. Pull that up to the top. There we go. Starts to move on you. Get your finger in there to hold it. There we go. Now you can see I've left myself some bare space at the front to tie in my wings and other materials. And I'm going to bind this all down. Bring my thread to the back. Now the first bucktail we put on is red, and we're not going to use much. We're going to stack it. Now I'm going to use this spot on the vise as my measuring point, about there. And I'm just going to put a turn. I'm going to let go of the bucktail so it starts to spin. And then I'll spread it around with my fingers. Put an extra turn in there. There we go. That's good. Put a couple of tight wraps, and we're going to come in here and trim off. And you can see how much room I've left at the front of the tube. That's kind of critical to avoid our thread skidding off the front of the tube when we tie our materials in, our bucktail, our wing materials, because it's very easy to happen. Or if you get too close to the end, your material skids off. I'll just bind this down. Bring my thread to the back. That's good. Now we get into the crystal flash. Basically, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to tie it on and spread it around. You don't want to do this too heavy. Maybe half a dozen strands is probably good enough. So what I'm going to do is going to tie the first ones in. Level with the, and it doesn't matter if they're a little ragged. Actually, I prefer that. Again, put just a loose wrap, spread it around. Another wrap or two to hold it. So we're going to lift this up, trim off, rotate it, put some more on, spread it around, a couple of tight wraps. Trim off, and we put the last bit in. Okay, hold it in place and just bind that down. Now I'm just going to smooth this up to create a ramp here for the yellow. I'll bring my thread back to about there. Now the yellow is going to be a lot heavier than the other two colors. This is primarily a yellow fly. So we might end up putting on two batches here. I'm going to stack. Okay, bring it back to that spot. Like the red, we're trying to get it to spin a little bit. Use your hand to splay it around. I'm going to try and cover about half. Then put a couple of firm wraps in there to hold it. Okay, now turn it upside down and put the last bit of yellow on. Okay, we'll trim off. Now I'm having just a little bit of trouble with my threads skidding off the end. One of the things you can do is just to help matters is just put a little bit of CA glue on there. Put on your thread. Gator whip finish. Now for some head cement, we're going to use some UV glue again. Now for some top coat. Okay, there's our Golden Garry Dog. And as you can see, I left a little bit of room. I've got probably a bit more flaring than I would like. But it does make doing the head a little bit easier, even though I did crowd it a little bit at the end and I had to use some, just remember the CA glue trick. If you find your thread skidding, just use a little CA glue and it prevents most of the skidding off. We're able to get coverage. I kept the head relatively neat and small on this one just to make a point, but you know, I'll leave that up to you, whether you want to run your materials to the end of the tube, go over the materials, risk some skidding off and heads that are kind of oddly shaped, or go for the neat head like I did in this case and still sometimes run with a bit of a problem with skidding off the end. But in the end, we still got a fishable fly, and I guess that's what really matters. So give it a try, the Golden Garry Dog. I think this will be effective for quite a few species. I mean, smallmouth would hit that for sure. Anyway, give it a try. Cheers.